Within your mighty hand, when the oceans rise and thunders roar, I will soar with you above the storm. Father, you are king over the flood. I will be still, know you. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this Quest session, Thursday morning. And today is a very special day. We have with us an eminent personality, an amazing teacher, an erudite scholar. The year was 2007, and a very anxious final year medical student was standing outside.
This war also, but I couldn't get anything out of this particular war, and we will possibly be getting some message out of this in years to come. Well, the only thing which I could get about the Ukraine war is this statement from ESC, that is European Society of Cardiology, made a mention that it has temporarily suspended the memberships of the cardiologists from Russia and the allied countries. That's the only message which I could get. But I think there is a message here. There is nothing new in the world except the history which we do not know. Okay, I'm just trying to recollect that history for you. Do we have students also here? No. Okay, fine, doesn't matter. The first one which I would like to talk about, because I'm just going by the order in which the students get to study medicine. Okay, the first one and the most important thing which has contributed to us by the war is on the pathology of atherosclerosis. No one knew that atherosclerosis started in the young age, and it was in the Korean War and subsequently in the Vietnam War. They found out that atherosclerosis happened in the youngsters by doing autopsy of the victims. Obviously, we know that the people who participate and die in wars will be in their 20s and 30s. So the people who died in the war were autopsied. And you see these studies in early 50s and early 60s, the Korean War and Vietnam War showed that at least 50 to 75% of them, that is the people who died, the mean age is around 22 years, had some form of atherosclerosis, and at least 15% of them had clinically significant narrowing of blood vessels. You all know that army recruitment is pretty stringent and they are not supposed to be having any disease. So these are the pictures of the autopsy pictures showing that this was prevalent even in people who were in 15s. Okay. The second important thing is on the diagnostic aspect. So we saw the pathological aspect. Second important thing is on the diagnostic aspect. Any guesses about this man? I know it's pretty difficult. This is Dr. Korotkov. We all know Korotkov's sounds. All of us have heard and keep hearing almost every day. Of course, I'm not sure how many of us are using mercury now. So this is Korotkov. And incidentally, Korotkov has nothing to do with cardiology. He is not even a physician. He was a surgeon. And he was actually working on his thesis. This is from his thesis. This was the BP apparatus of yesteryears. He was working on this thesis called Experiment for Determining the Efficiency of Arterial Collaterals. So he was basically a surgeon working in his hospital, and he switched over to the battlefield once the Russo-Japanese War broke out in 1904. So he chose to work in the army field, and he extended this study there. So there were many gunshot wounds over the arteries, over the extremities, and he wanted to know whether the limbs will survive or not. And incidentally, he had been taught by his elders that they should always auscultate any swelling, because that's the basic primitive step which is required to rule out an aneurysm. So he thought he will extend this to his people who have sustained injury. So he started oscillating above and below the injury, gunshot wounds. So he wanted to see whether there is any vascularity. So he started hearing sounds whenever there is a vascularity. Whenever there was no vascularity in absolute cutoff, he didn't hear that. So this is how the Korotkov sounds came into existence. I'm sure all of us are following this now. So this is a picture of Korotkov in the battlefield. The next thing is on the management. This was the initial comment by Paget in 1895 that surgery cannot be performed on a beating heart. Surgery of the heart has probably reached the limit set by nature, and no new methods and no new discovery can overcome the natural difficulties that attend a wound of the heart. This is how people were claiming to start with. But then in the World War I, I'm sorry for the spelling mistake over there, one British soldier was shot by a machine gun bullet from 500 yards. And I'm not sure this picture will be clear. It shows the bullet in the center of the heart. Okay. So the bullet was piercing the interventricular septum, the septum which separates the two ventricles. Unfortunately, at that time, there was no imaging facility. The only imaging which was available was a chest X-ray and not an echo or a CT scan. So there were no higher-end antibiotics, which are the norm now, unfortunately. There were no provision to give a blood transfusion. There were no sophisticated theaters. And even the anesthesia was pretty much preliminary. So they managed to open the heart and they found that this is not his picture. This echo shows a bullet in the interventricular septum. I just picked up from the net. So Dr. Turner thought he will venture into this. He opened the chest, he rotated that to the heart. Unfortunately, the heart stopped and he didn't know what to do at that time. There was no defib or a pacemaker for him to help to bail out at that situation. So what he did was to wisely abandon the surgery and he gave up the surgery. What happened was the patient survived to participate in the Second World War. That was the funniest thing. And from the First World War to the Second World War, nothing happened in the cardiac surgery field because there was no necessity possibly. Okay. But then there was some improvement. They had penicillin in their hands. They had blood transfusion available. And incidentally, the war casualties, including the civilian casualties, multiplied this time in the Second World War. As I said, penicillin was available and blood transfusion was available. The transfusion they used to give 1 liter in 1 minute. They had methods, crude methods to do that at that time. So they had opportunities to explore many hearts. We don't have data how many of them actually succeeded. But what is interesting is these were the surgeons who lived longer and then later out of the war situation, they ventured into the cardiac surgery. This is how cardiac surgery came up. Okay. So man becomes his most creative during the war. Okay. Doesn't mean that we should all keep fighting. I think my interest started in learning about the war because of my focus on preventive stuff. So this is the Second World War when Germany invaded Norway. Okay, Germans literally confiscated everything from the Norwegian field. They took away all the animals which these people were eating upon. So everything was removed and people were basically left with only vegetarian food, and that too portions were available in the ration. Sorry for that. So this is the initial stage from 1927. Okay, fine. So from 1927, the incidence of MI in myocardial infarction was going up in Norway. But look at this. When the war in 1940 started, it all came down, only to go up in 1945 when the war ended and Hitler's rule came down. So that is one interesting thing which I learned. Okay, so we learned that the pathology started, the knowledge about the pathology started in the war field, and similarly the prevention also started in the war field. So they started talking about hypocaloric diet and mostly predominantly plant-based diet at that time. The second thing which fascinated me was about this particular place called North Karelia in Finland. So, okay, it's an exotic place. When we visit, we are also allowed to participate in hunting, picking up cherries, fishing. All these things are part of our tourism activities in these places. So this is a small place in Finland. This was the status in Finland in 1973. Finland was the topper in the number of deaths due to coronary artery disease. Okay. So what happened was the people realized that something has to be done. So they wrote a petition to the government. And Dr. Pushkar, he was a public health personnel, was in his 30s at that time. He was appointed as the head of the committee. So he started going into the epidemiological data and he found nothing wrong with their basic blood parameters. It was like the other countries. But what he realized was there was a change in their habits. Following the war, the government chose to give them freebies. They gave them grasslands, they gave them animals too. So basically the agriculturists gave up their land for the animals. The animals were feeding the grass and people were eating the animals, consuming the animals. So that changed the entire habit. So he realized that this has to be, people have to put a full stop to this particular habit. And I'm sure this audience will realize that it's not going to be easy to stop anyone eating non-vegetarian if they're already addicted to, and especially when it is given free. Okay, the restaurants are all flourishing and nobody was willing to listen to him, Dr. Pushkar. So he formed an association called Martha Organization, which was exclusively for women in Finland. So the Martha Organization came up with a lot of suggestions. I just would like to mention a few here. One is basically substituting mushrooms for non-vegetarian. It's not substituting, it's just adding on mushrooms to preserve the taste. Taste is what makes us eat whatever we want. So they wanted to make it tastier. And these cherries were available seasonally only. So he made arrangements to see to that these berries were available throughout the year. So slowly they started introducing vegetables into there. People were smoking a lot. So there was a quit to win contest. Pathways are created for cyclists and walkers. And subsequently, slowly, over years, look at this, fantastic results. The incidence of mortality due to coronary artery disease came down significantly. This is the Finland flag. So from 700 to, it came down to 100 per lakh mortality in 2011. Let's see what is it in India. In 2016, it's around 272 per 1 lakh, as against the world's 235. So the question is, who should wage a battle? I think we should start the war against coronary artery disease and other non-communicable diseases. Well, for a cardiologist, ACE is always angiotensin converting enzyme. But I think not just for cardiologists, for everybody over here, ACU should stand for adverse childhood events. Okay, to quote this is again in World War II, where people were evacuated from, children were evacuated from Finland to Sweden and Denmark. See these visuals. People were taken with their consent, with their parents' consent. They were left with the new parents in Sweden or else in orphanages. So they literally forgot their own language. Decades later, when they came to meet their parents, they didn't even know their own language. They didn't know how to communicate with their parents. Do we have time? Can I play this video for 2 minutes? Adverse childhood event is something which is coming up in a very big way as the reason for hypertension and a lot of other non-communicable diseases. So the key message is here, these people were followed up for decades and they found that they had a lot of non-communicable diseases. Okay, this is because the early life traumatic experiences act on the hypothalamic pituitary adrenocortical axis. So diabetes was high, heart disease was high. The post-traumatic stress disorders were very high. This is a quote which I thought I should definitely share. There are a lot of children in Afghanistan, but very little childhood. Okay. So incidentally, Afghanistan ranks first in terms of war victims and ranks 6th in terms of coronary artery disease. That shows the correlation. So there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So life cannot be smooth all the time. We have to go through thorny phases in our life also. So for the doctor in you, this in us, for that sake, anything which we come across as an adversity must serve to add on to our protocols. Any death, any morbidity, any mortality should be scrutinized and we should actually learn out of that. Okay. I always prescribe this book called Checklist Manifesto to all my students. Okay. It is something which is worth reading. Just because you have missed out a small tick mark in your checklist, a lot of things have happened to the patient in terms of morbidity, in terms of expenditure. For an individual in you, that's for the doctor in you, for an individual in you, adversities are something which cannot be avoided. What we can do is to react to it positively. That's the message which I thought I should share. So adversity is one of the greatest teachers in our life, and every adversity has the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. So it's time we scrutinize all those adversities which we have come across, and the most important thing is to be prepared and not just go against. So you cannot pray that I should not have a problem. It is better that we have problems, and the most important thing is we learn out of it. So this is my short presentation. I'm sorry, I'm not sure whether I actually satisfied the quest forum here, But this is from the preventive aspect. I thought it is important I share, because history is almost never given importance, and that is possibly the reason why we are all here as doctors. Because we don't like Max, we didn't like, I think every field has an application in medicine. Thank you, Director Sir, and all dignitaries for bearing with me. Thank you.
Dr. Rajendiran, thank you so much for teaching us how the wars and history teaches us so much. It was fascinating actually, and we realized that there's so much for us to look back at our own country and see how we can understand things better. I just wondered, as I was asking a little while ago, what is preventive cardiology and how can we apply it here in Kerala? Because we need this a lot. You know about Kerala. You know that we are really going downhill. Are there thoughts that you would share with us, because you won't have this whole forum during the smaller sessions?
Fine, sir. Can I say what I am doing? Fine. Okay. So it all started in 2018. So we thought that is because one of my favorite trustees was there between 2000. I mean, he died in 2016. So the family approached me and said we have to do something on his name. So we thought we will adopt his village and start doing primary prevention work. So we started that in 2018, and I would like to admit that it was definitely a failure. Okay, because we didn't have an exposure to the villages. So we started off in the wrong foot first. Then we realized people are not in need of primary prevention in villages. So we need to take care of the society before we start advising to people. So in 2019, we changed our strategy. We started mingling with the people, started providing some educational facilities, few seats in our own PhD institutions. We started getting them in some jobs in our own institutes. We started teaching them as to how to live on their own. Like, for example, we taught them computer science. We started teaching them tailoring activities. So these were the initiatives, and slowly then we started looking out for risk factors in them. Okay, this experience is something which is interesting to listen to. We had 1,500 individuals in that village in Panchayat, and it took nearly 3 months for us to get the blood samples, though we went street by street. So that was the interest which people had. And every day evening we will call the concerned person and say that your sugar is high. We will tell them that your sugar is 400, you need attention. This patient started coming 3 months later and said, please give me the report. I want treatment now. Okay, so this was the reception in 2018. Now what we have decided is we will choose handpick families which are interested. Actually, we have handpicked those families, 40. We are not going to invest on investigations. We are going to train them in few things like healthy cooking. We have formed a big team to do this. So we thought only those 40 people will show the response. We will give them a kitchen garden, small facilities to do a kitchen garden there. To increase the physical activity, we thought we'll indulge them in some competitions, games like what was shown in the North Korea project. So 2019 we decided these things, but unfortunately 2020 the COVID came and we had to stop all these activities. So in 2022 what we have done is, instead of us taking up all these projects, we have involved various PhD institutions. Like, for example, PhD school students, they travel to the village, they talk to the students over there. Not just about health, it's about everything. It's about learning maths, it's about learning physics, chemistry, everything. And thereby, both the parties actually learn. The PhD public school students are not exposed much to poverty. It is important they learn that. So they have started learning. So slowly, our health activities have started with the children rather than from the adults, because we thought children can actually follow it better. That is the first step which we have taken, and we have started doing it for the last 6 months. So every alternate Saturdays, the students visit, and we prime our students as to what to teach them. This is step number 1. Step number 2, from PSG College of Technology, we have taken few women faculty who have been associated with us in this project for the last 3-4 years, and they are going and teaching them the basic hygiene. So these are the 2 steps which we have taken. Now we have taken 40 families, and we are going to focus only on those 40 families. The problem with these villages is still there is a caste division, so we are not able to get everybody on the same fold. That's one problem. So meanwhile, while in this 2021, we had nothing to do with the village at that time. So we started discussing with few pioneers in this prevention, cardiac prevention activities. So we spoke with Dr. S.L. Steen, who is the cardiologist for Bill Clinton. So I'm not sure how many of you are aware that Bill Clinton had undergone a surgery, and subsequently he had a stenting, and within a few months, and subsequently he again started having pain. And he decided to switch over to preventive medicine. So he started following preventive medicine. That he went through certain studies. And the most important study which he went through was the China study, which is never quoted amongst the cardiologists. So that's on primary prevention study. So he started following S.L. Steen's dietary advice and physical activity advice. And for the last 1 decade, he hasn't had a cardiac event. Okay, so just talking about S.L. Steen, many of us may not be knowing. So I had a chance to discuss with the Dr. S.L. Steen, and S.L. Steen said very clearly and cleverly, do not focus on primary prevention. It is not going to be easy. So start off with secondary prevention goals. Okay, so the next step started again in 2019. We tasted this. So we started having people who are refractory to medical and surgical management. Post-surgery, people having significant symptoms. So we never stopped any of these medications. We continued all the medications, and what we did was to hospitalize them for 10 days and put them on a significant lifestyle modification under our supervision. So that included dietary, predominantly plant-based diet, yoga, physical activity, and most importantly, stress management. So when we had group sessions, when we have individual sessions, we came to know that stress is playing literally havoc. And what we, as a cardiologist or as a physician, what we generally do is in OPD is to put a patient on alprazolam or whatever comes to our mind on that day. We definitely realize that that is not the way to go about. So we have got a psychologist in our fold. So the psychologist started exploring. Okay, so these 30 people had intractable angina. Almost all of them had undergone a procedure or 2 in the past, and they had refractory symptoms. So we lost 8 of them in 1 year. So such was the severity. 1 committed suicide, the rest 7 died. All the others are living even now. Okay, they are not 100% into the lifestyle measures, but they are following only 50% or so. But still they are able to do a good. The third thing which we thought we should be doing to the society is early detection of coronary artery disease. So whenever it comes to early detection of coronary artery disease, we call something as a master health checkup. But at the same time, we all know that many master health checkups do not prevent MI. And in fact, a lot of people would have said that I have undergone a treadmill in the recent past. Why did I get an MI now? Why was it not picked up then? Okay, so if you actually go through the indications for a treadmill, there is no class 1 indication. Okay, so there is only when you have a doubt whether somebody's pain is cardiac or non-cardiac, treadmill is something which is indicated. So we thought we should get into the early markers. And as far as the present day is concerned, the subclinical atherosclerosis is best detected by a CT coronary calcium, not a CT angio. It is a CT coronary calcium. Then we focus on carotid intimal medial thickness, we have invested on pulse wave velocity and ankle brachial index. So these 4 measurements for detecting the subclinical atherosclerosis before the person becomes symptomatic or even before the lumen is obstructed, because the subclinical atherosclerosis, the coronary calcium picks up the calcium, and even if it is there in the intima, not into the lumen. Okay, so we started investing this on this screening modalities. So we call it as a Pearl Clinic. You can browse and see in the PSG, we started something called as Pearl Clinic. P stands for prevention, EARL stands for early detection. So Pearl is prevention and early detection. So clinic, every word has a unique, it's basically an acronym. C stands for cardiovascular diseases. L stands for other lifestyle diseases. So other lifestyle diseases or diabetes, hypertension, dyslipidemia. LI stands for lifestyle diseases. N stands for novel methods. That's what I said. Actually, they are not novel. They have been they are existing for ages, more than 2 decades, and we have not been doing that, unfortunately. So novel methods. I stands for integrated. So by integration, what I mean is a cardiologist is there in the team, a community medicine person is there in the team, a professor is there in the team, community medicine professor is there in the team. We have a psychologist, we have a physiatrist, we have a team of physiotherapists and dietitians who interact with these patients. Okay. The last C stands for a continued care, because in a master health checkup, it's just doing health checkup every year. That's what is called master health checkup, especially if it is sponsored. Okay, so you do cholesterol today and then you check it after 1 year. That is the routine master health checkup. But here we thought we should have a continued care. That basically means just have a follow-up at periodic intervals, call them up and do it. So this is a program which we have started now. So this is the third one which we have started, and the fourth one is cardiac rehabilitation. Cardiac rehabilitation post-MI, that plays a major role in the quality of life in a given individual who had an MI. Okay, so again, the whole team follows up these people. I won't call it a very successful program, but only people who are willing are coming to us. So we have phase 1 cardiac rehabilitation is something which we do inside the hospital. So that I think almost everybody undergoes. For phase 2, we have developed some programs like weekly, twice, weekly once, or weekly thrice, depending on from where they are coming, to educate them about their physical activity, to tell them what is the tolerable physical activity which they can do in the next few weeks to few months post MI. So these are the 4 programs which we have started. I think this is going to make a huge difference in the long run. This is going to be a very, very slow process because prevention is not something which is universally followed. Unfortunately, not even followed by the doctors per se. So, Dr. Chandy, I'm not sure whether I have answered your question. These are the 4 measures which we have taken up.
Given us a lot of ideas to think about. Our medical superintendent sitting next to me, and I've just been nudging him.
Thank you, Dr. Rajendiran, for your talk. I like the graph about Norway. You said from 1940 to 45, things dropped. You assumed a little bit maybe due to plant-based diet could be a reason. Now, how do we convince our patients to move to a vegetarian diet or a vegan diet, which I know in Europe is very popular, vegan? Is there really evidence, or like as a Steno 2 trial says, it's all multifactorial interventions which are causing it? So how do you, is there any evidence to tease out the benefit of diet, particularly vegetarianism? In India, it's common, right? That's why.
Well, I think it's a very difficult question to answer because not too many studies have been done in a large scale. Okay, these people like Dr. Esselstyn and some of you might have heard of Dr. Dean Ornish. These are the 2 people who actually followed this. I've been advocating this. So now I'd like to say one thing. I was actually asking one of my endocrinologists about reversal of diabetes. Do you agree with the term reversal of diabetes? Okay. So the ADA also advises whole food plant-based diet, incidentally. Okay, I think when we read the guidelines, we focus on the newer arrivals rather than the lifestyle modification. ADA 2022 has definitely mentioned about the plant-based diet. Similarly, now the American guidelines, the Canadian guidelines, all of them are moving towards plant-based diet. Okay, whole food plant-based diet is the best way to go about. But if you're going to push for a whole food plant-based diet, it's going to be a failure. Let me say what is whole food plant-based diet. Plant-based diet is pretty obvious. That means you're going to avoid animal products. Whole food is basically you're going to avoid processed food like our white rice. Instead you go for alternative rices. Okay, so instead of oil you go for the whole nuts. This is the way. So I've realized that if you're going to push for this whole food plant-based diet, everything is going to be a failure. So the best is to go for a flexitarian diet. Flexitarian diet according to that individual, to suit that particular individual. So it should be a predominantly whole food plant-based diet, and you have to help the patient out. So what we have done in our questionnaire, what we have done is, we ask the patient's likes and dislikes, what all they like, what all they don't like. So if they're liking something very much, best is not to have a hand on it to start with. And it is always wiser not to give one diet slip to the patient, which has to be followed eternally. That is not going to happen. So for people who are educated and are willing to follow up with us, what we have started doing is, we have periodic suggestions for them. Okay, the focus will be like to start with, to push on things which they have to take more. Okay, so incidentally, another thing which I would like to share here is, in Lancet 2016, there was a study published saying that dietary habits form 56% of the causes for ischemic heart disease. So let's ask ourselves, how many times have we asked the dietary habits following an MI? We look for all the sophisticated investigations, and we don't tell the patient that diet is something which is important. And the same Lancet, you can see that in global burden of diseases, it's very categorically, it mentions that if you take the first 10 dietary causes for coronary artery disease, or for that sake any NCDs, what we preach the patients are not the first 5. I'm not sure whether I have conveyed it. What all do we say? Don't take saturated fat. Don't take too much of dairy products. Okay, don't take sugar sweetened beverages. These are the negative advices which we give. But if you actually browse and see that, they form the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th causes. The first 5 will be like this: not taking fruits, not taking vegetables, not taking whole food, not taking nuts and seeds, not taking fibers. Okay, so we have started focusing on things the patient has to increase. So that is our first step. Again, we have to tell them the drawbacks of eating all these things at one go. Okay, somebody starts eating too much of fiber, we know the stomach gets bloated. So we help them to overcome this. The first step is to increase things. The second thing is to reduce. Third step, if at all they are willing, is to eliminate the animal products. So how to minimize the animal products, how to minimize the oil. So we can always say that you have to follow an oil-free diet, but who is going to follow? How is it going to be possible? It's not going to be possible. So I think a practical, individualized and stepwise diet prescription. It is not a diet counseling. It's not a diet sheet. It should be a diet prescription. A prescription, as you know, is individualized for the individual, for the given person. Similarly, exercise also, we must be able to give them based on the FIT principle. So you must give them a prescription. That is something which is important. Have I answered, Doctor?
Thank you, Dr. Rajendiran. That was a very fascinating narrative intertwining war with the growth of cardiology. You put up an interesting aspect of adverse childhood events with cardiac mortality. So primarily majority of the diseases, even non-communicable diseases, are relying on genetic risk factors as the predisposition. So this is interesting observation regarding adverse childhood events. So any thoughts regarding the genetic makeup with preventive cardiology? That is one. And second, in your thoughts on the now very hyped up fitness freaks getting cardiac events.
Okay. The fitness freaks getting into cardiac events is something pretty much known these days, especially following the death of few actors. Okay, so again, that goes on to show that more than the fitness, it is the diet and the stress which plays a major role. Okay, the fitness freaks are the ones who actually we don't see much of this in the poverty line. We see them all in the high income group. Okay, so equally their stress goes up, their sleep goes down. So I don't know, maybe I should have taken that topic, the entire stuff. So there is a course in India called ISLM, Indian Society of Lifestyle Medicine. Okay, like Dr. Finn said, it has picked up in more than Europe. It has picked up very much in USA. So if you go to USA, you can just have to browse Holy Cow. If you just browse Holy Cow, that will show you where all the vegan food are available. Okay, so you can also choose for a whole food plant-based diet. You've got so much of restaurants there. How many of you, I do not know whether you can follow Tamil. We have in Coimbatore, we've got something called as a race course road. Jacob must be familiar with that. So there people walk. Okay, so in Tamil it is Nadai. In Malayalam it is Nadai. Nadai, okay. So the Nadai is invariably followed by a Vadai in Annapurna. Okay, so it is not the exercise which matters. If you see the American guidelines also, American guidelines actually say 150 minutes of exercise per week. That's it. So that basically boils down to around 21 minutes per day. So nobody says that the fitness freaks will not have a cardiac problem. So what matters the most is the diet, number one. So all the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, I was about to say this ISLM, I think people can become a member. If not take up the board exams, they can become a member. Many of our PSG people have started appearing for this ISLM exams. I'm a member, I have not taken up the exams. So it focuses on 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. Again, if students are here, it's easy to remember because these look like more of a theory question rather than a practical stuff. If you start following, you don't need acronyms. Okay, so I call it as 2ESR. 2ESR. ESR is everybody familiar with. So the first E is eating. Second E is exercise. So there are 2 S which have to be focused. One is sleep, second one is stress. There are 2 R's which need to be focused. The first R is risky substances, amongst which smoking comes. Now I will add on one more S there. It is a screen time. Screen time and sedentary lifestyle have added on, should become under risky substances. And the last R is on relationships. How your social relationships are there, how your family relationship. These are supposed to play a major role. That is something which has come up in a big way. Cardiologists might have gone through the studies where the dog owners had a lesser risk of heart disease. That's basically something for them to cheer up with. So all these 6 pillars must be focused on. So unfortunately, the fitness freaks focus on only one pillar. And that too, it is just not vada. They also get into a lot of other substances as protein building. Okay, the protein building substances, majority of them might have some steroids. So that's also another thing. Well, what was the first question? I'm sorry. Oh, genetic, fine. Well, I thought I'll take up that slide if you allow me. This was the slide which I was talking to you about. I mean, this is not in the agenda, but I had given a talk recently. You can see that, okay, other thing which I wanted to stress on these two slides. So whatever I said, it's there. Whatever we talk is in the bottom of the screen. Okay. The genetics part. well, I'm not sure whether it's here in this, doesn't matter anyhow. So the genetics part is basically like this. So basically it all loads the gun. This is the quote which comes. What is important is to pull the trigger. The trigger is your bad habits. So not every genetically predisposed person manifests as ischemic heart disease or a diabetic. It is the lifestyle which pushes him to get into diabetic status. So there are many studies, I don't know the names of those studies. There are many studies which have shown that there is a considerable reduction of up to 50% in a genetically predisposed individual. If they follow lifestyle modification, they can actually push off the heart disease and diabetes. Now I wanted to show that one of the American presidents, he was attending the American Heart Association meeting, and while the meeting was on, he had this MI. And he went on to quote that this hall is full of cardiologists and it's in your hands to prevent further problems. The entire tree has been cut off, I'm the only stem who is remaining. So then came a lot of research on genetics, and they say yes, genetics do play a role, but what is important is the trigger. The trigger is your lifestyle, and one of the triggers is stress. So it is important you focus on all 6 pillars. That is something which is important.
Thank you so much, sir. It was like sitting in one of your specialty clinic classes decades ago. Thank you so much. And before we close this session, may I request our director, George Chandy sir, and our principal, Girija Mohan ma'am, to honor GR sir with a ponnada. Can we put our hands together and thank Rajendran? Yes. And may I request our Dean of Medical Education, Dr. Thomas Chacko sir, who is GR sir's former colleague, and our Associate Director, John Valiat sir, to honor him with a little memento. Thank you, sirs. Thank you, ma'am. Yes. So I would like to thank Rajendran sir once again for that wonderful exposition of knowledge, and as I have always known, he is a treasure trove of knowledge, and he is always has his bag of surprises. Sir, thank you so much for coming over and talking to our beloved BCMCH family. Let's put our hands together and thank him once again. Thank you, sir. So, thank you, dear family. Have a wonderful day. God bless. Thank you.